A really important part of any statistical investigation is understanding your outcome measurement. You have to know that the measurement device that you're using is reproducible, and you have to have some concept about its accuracy and precision. If you've got a faulty device, which is supposed to be a meter long and it's not actually a meter long, it's only 90 centimeters, this can be a problem. So you have to know about the manufacturing quality of a device and what it can measure. Try not to use things at the limits of their measurement scale, because these are likely to be problems for the future. When you do a meta-analysis, you're trying to calculate an effect size. Modern randomized clinical trials need to take account of placebo effects. This study is about acupuncture, so this is particularly difficult to work with. How do you create a placebo for acupuncture? How can you give a patient something that looks like acupuncture but isn't acupuncture? With a tablet, that's easy. You can just give them a sugar pill that looks exactly the same as the pill which contains the active ingredient. But in this case, placebo experiments are fairly challenging. The way you should carry out an RCT is to compare treatment to placebo or the best current treatment. You should not really compare it to untreated. Sometimes this is done, and sometimes you end up coming up with saying that this drug is really effective, but it is no more effective than the existing treatment. This does not make it a good new effective drug. Now, what you want to do is see a larger effect in the treatment, the new thing that you're doing, than in the current best treatment or the placebo. What should we do with placebo effects? I don't know, and that's something that needs to be discussed at the end of this meta-analysis. For acupuncture, you want to see a reduction in the amount of neck pain. Pain can be measured using a variety of different tools. There are some pain questionnaires to do with mobility, and these can be quite long and quite involved questionnaires. The simplest thing is something called a Visual Analogue Scale. Now, you might see these sometimes in hospitals if you've been in to ask you how much it hurt. And that was the scale that was used in these meta-analyses. It's going to be used in this meta-analysis and was used in the original papers. So there's a larger number of studies that use the VAS compared to the questionnaire-based methods. They're simpler to analyze and simpler to understand. If acupuncture works, VAS will be reduced. If it doesn't, then it won't. Now, as I said, placebos are difficult. For acupuncture, looking at the papers, what they've done is sham acupuncture, so needles in the wrong places. Alternative treatments such as massage, is that really a placebo? Aren't you going to recognize what is massage and what is acupuncture? And there's some interesting ways they've hidden acupuncture, where they used a kind of pad which you apply to the patient in the right locations. But underneath that pad, you can either have a needle, a concealed needle, or not. So the patient is actually unaware. Can you actually sense acupuncture needles going in? The time I had it done, I put in one needle before I said no way, because I really hate needles. I think you can. So I still think that sham acupuncture is quite difficult to do. Visual Analogue Scale is a subjective measure. Different people have different tolerances to pain and different views about how much something hurts. But it is a commonly used measure of pain intensity. It is continuous, and that makes it different to a Likert scale, which has different preferences. So how much do you like this course? How much do you like this lecturer? On a scale from 1 to 5, pick one of the numbers. So it's continuous in that you have a 10 centimeter wide or 100 millimeter wide line, and you can place the slider or the line or draw a line in pencil anywhere along that line. More modern ones use the slider on an electronic thing. Now this is a round dot, so it's slightly bigger than before, so you haven't quite got the variability that you had when you were just drawing a pencil line. So, I mean, in some ways it's harder to see the center of the line and to know what number you've actually picked compared to using the pencil line. So there are challenges of reproducibility between electronic and paper-based recording, which if you look in the article by Delgado, he talks about. Now, Delgado also says that the minimum clinically important difference is 1.4 centimeters or 14 millimeters. This will be important to come back to later. So here's an example of a visual analog scale. No pain, pain as bad as it could possibly be. You're going to shift with experience where you put pain as bad as it can possibly be, depending on how bad a pain you've experienced in your life. The top one is by far the best one. The next one, where you've got mild, moderate and severe, and you're already dividing that line into subsections where you're possibly biasing where the person who's going to record the measurement is going to put their mark. And when you get to the full numerical scale, then there's definitely a bit of a problem, because you've changed the way that people are going to use the scale. It would be nice to know which of these scales were used in each of the papers to see if they're directly comparable, but we don't get that chance. Now this is a fairly typical scale that you can get, and I don't like it at all because of this sense of biasing. The smiley faces, the numerical position, the ruler, everything makes it much more quantifiable and much more that the person is thinking of a specific number when they go to use this tool. Whereas in the plain one, where you haven't got any scales on it, they're just looking at a position along that line. And I think you're going to get different results depending on whether you use the one which has the numerical grades on it or the one which is the continuous one. So my preference is for the continuous one. So as I said, I think it's bad because there's too many text cues which are going to be suggestive to the participants where they place the score. The ruler particularly makes this clear that there's a numerical measurement. The plain line is a much more unbiased tool, which is much less likely to lead to errors. And if you want to look up more, you can look up visual analog scales, in that case used in educational research, not just in pain, and Delgado's article where they investigated reproducibility.